It's the Farmer to Farmer podcast, episode 72, and this is your host, Chris Blanchard. My guest today, Jen Campbell, raises 2 acres of vegetables on Canada's Prince Edward Island at Jen and Derek's Organic Farm. She sells about $80,000 of certified organic vegetables per year, primarily through a 90-member CSA, as well as to a retail store and a wholesale distributor. Jen has been farming on Prince Edward Island since 2006, and she tells the story of growing her farm from a part-time operation to a full-time income. We talk about how she made the leap to full-time farming, including the decisions that she and Derek made to have Jen focus on the farm while Derek works off farm. Jen also provides an honest look at her experience of having twins early in her full-time farming career, how she managed that in the early years, and the decisions that she made around childcare and schooling. Prince Edward Island is potato country, and Jen and Derek's organic farm is located in one corner of a conventional potato farm. Jen shares the social and cultural strategies she follows to maintain the integrity of organic crops, and how she fits into the community of conventional potato growers on the island. We also touch on her participation in a winter CSA program, including how to harvest roots on a small scale and the economics of winter storage, as well as tractor farming on 2 acres and how she's adapted the food safety practices of her conventional, large-scale neighbors to her own operation. Jen's the real deal. I hope you enjoy getting to know her. I know I did. The Farmer to Farmer podcast is made possible with the generous support of Vermont Compost Company, founded by organic crop growing professionals committed to meeting the need for high quality compost and compost-based living soil mixes for certified organic plant production. VermontCompost.com. This episode of the Farmer to Farmer podcast is sponsored by FarmFan. Ever wish you could text a reminder to all of your customers? FarmFan does just that, increasing market turnout and sales week after week. FarmFanApp.com or see farmertofarmerpodcast.com/sponsors for 25% off your 6 or 12-month subscription. Jen Campbell, welcome to the Farmer to Farmer podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So great that you could join me today. I hear that it's a rainy and cool day out there in the Atlantic Ocean.
Yes, it's definitely, it's windy and it's cool and it's wet, but we're grateful for the rain because it was very dry.
So Jen, I thought it would be great if you could start us off by talking some about Jen and Derek's organic farm and especially your location there on Prince Edward Island, which maybe I'll let you do the geography on that so that I don't screw it up.
All right, well, that sounds good. So we live on PEI, and we live just about 10 minutes outside of Summerside. So that's, we're not the western part of the province, but we're definitely, when people talk about PEI, we're at the western end of the island. Although there's always a controversy on PEI if you're from up west or down east, but we're not central, we're not west, we're not east. We're kind of on the western side. But so we live close to a city, which is about 14,000 people. And where the farm is situated, we are in potato belts. We are surrounded by potato farmers, and most of them are fairly large farms, growing maybe anywhere between 500 and 900 acres of potatoes. So we are nestled on our small little 4-acre rental parcel amidst lots of potato growers. So it's a beautiful part of the island. It's very flat. Very windy here all the time, but very grateful to be here. We had a farm in Brookvale, which is a hillier part of the island, and we moved there in 2006, I believe. We bought our first farm, and then we've been here now at this new farm for 5 years. So it's much flatter here, and it's beautiful part of the island.
And Prince Edward Island is located north of Nova Scotia and east of New Brunswick, right?
Yeah, we're basically, if you look at a map, you'll see New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, and then we're just up above, and we're just sitting in this beautiful little oasis, which I think is a beautiful oasis, where we've got a bridge that connects us, and we can get here from a ferry, but otherwise, we're pretty secluded.
Which, again, is for those of us who are provincial Americans like me, kind of you're off to the east of northern Maine. So you're actually, you're way out there. You mentioned the potato farms in the area. Now you rent land from your father, right?
Yes, we do. Yeah, when we decided to sell our first farm, we approached my family's farm because we wanted to be closer to both of our families. And we found a place that we really, really loved. It was just a house, but it was also right next door to one of my father's fields. So we convinced them to let us rent 4 acres of the land, which we have now converted to organic land. But it's a really kind of a unique opportunity to be immersed in organic agriculture, but surrounded by conventional farms, which most of the land right around us is my father's, but there's also others, our neighbors that aren't family, but they are neighbors.
Potato farming is a pretty chemically soaked agriculture.
Yeah, potato farming relies heavily on inputs, and here on the island, it's big business here on PEI, and like many of my neighbors and my whole family, I grew up, I'm a potato baby. I grew up on a potato farm, and it's very divisive here. Like it tends to be very, I don't know if not politically correct, but it's a hard business to be in now. The perception isn't very favorable. The potato growers have a hard job because to produce the amount of acres that they're in production, they rely heavily on chemical fertilizers and on pesticides to get that product which they need for production for their French fries. So it's definitely not an organic production. But I know many potato farmers that I work for a little bit. I do help them with their on-farm food safety audits, and they have a hard job. Their neighbors don't often maybe approve of their practices, but I feel that even though we farm very differently, they take great pride in the production that they produce. And I know not a lot of them, they don't like spraying. It's not something that they want to do. My father drives a water truck. My uncle drives a sprayer, and I don't think anyone gets up at, 4 a.m. and wants to go spray, but it's just part of their production. And, I'm just grateful that I don't have to drive that sprayer.
Now, are you guys certified organic?
Yes. Yep. We are certified organic.
And being in the middle of all of that production, a 2-acre plot's a pretty small plot. What kinds of steps are you taking to make sure that you can maintain your certified status?
Yeah, that's a great question. People ask us that all the time. I mean, in a perfect world, it's not ideal how in our situation where we were at our other farm in Brookvale, we were completely secluded by anybody. So we were, when you thought of it like quote unquote, it was easy to be organic there because we didn't have any drift. Here we are, one of our field is actually right next to my father's field, which we have the proper buffer. We actually took twice the amount of buffer that the regulations stated. And then on the other two sides, we have a roadway in between plus a buffer. And then on the third side is our farm driveway and our own property. So it's really only the one side. And every year when our organic inspector comes to do our inspection, it is always something that they note as a point of concern because my father's land and our land are basically right next door to each other, and we don't have any windbreaks or hedgerows. So it is definitely something that they note every year, but they also note that we are completely in compliance and we take double the buffer that we're required. But it is optics, People say, oh, how can you really be organic? You're right next to a conventional farm. Well, I mean, the CFIA defines the buffer, and we follow that, and then it took twice as much as they required. So, you do your best. And Dad, when I have employees that are maybe nervous about, sprays, Dad usually calls me in the morning and says, okay, we're going to be next door at 9 o'clock. So that way we can have our harvesting done, and maybe we can be in the packing shed when he comes with the sprayer. But I mean, optics aren't great. I mean, it's, when I look out and I'm harvesting and I see the sprayer come down the door, you feel a little awkward because, here we are in an organic farm, but, I follow the regulations and I know Dad and them follow their regulations for spraying in the proper weather. So, you kind of trust the process. So, yeah.
Well, and I guess that's a place where it's probably an advantage to have a relationship with your dad as the landowner so that you're not just dealing with some stranger or somebody from the local farmers co-op coming down and I mean, I know in Iowa we used to see, we saw crazy spraying going on and crazy high winds and pretty much, our neighbors cared, but when they would hire somebody else to come in to do the spraying, right, those folks didn't give two poots about us. Yeah, no, you're right. And we are very fortunate that it's my own father and my family farm, it's my uncles and my brother and my dad. So, we have great communication. They kind of give me a hard time sometimes, it's like it's my hobby farm, right? Because they're growing huge acres. So I think sometimes I might be the community joke, but at the same time, I feel that
I have respect for what they do. I might not farm the same way, but I hope that, the respect is I think there's mutual respect there, back and forth, for sure.
And not to dwell too much on the potato farms around you, but I'm curious, what does the potato farming economy look like there on PEI? Because I know, here in the Midwest in the United States, the farm economy is not looking good right now. Prices are kind of in the toilet. Input prices are up. There's a real credit crunch going on right now. Are you seeing sort of a similar environment economically on PEI for the potato farms, or is that still a pretty economically viable way for your neighbors to make a living?
Well, it's hard for me to really say that without knowing, each firm is probably in a different financial situation. Because of the work I do with some growers, with their on-farm food safety, I have, I sit there and they like to talk to me. I don't know, it almost feels like therapy sometimes. And I know a lot of them are going through some very stressful times. But, I think what we've seen over the last few years is there's been a lot of smaller guys have gotten out of the industry because of the real industry here is French fries. And one of our main processors moved out of the province last year or the year before. So there's one processor left. And, they tend to deal with the bigger farms. So I think some of the small guys have definitely felt the pressure and have sold out to their neighbors. And it's a very high stress industry. I mean, I'm super proud of my family and how far they've come. They've really mechanized the last few years, put up new infrastructure. But I know it must be I have no idea what their books look like, and I'm sure they have some good years and some bad years. But I definitely, I hear the growers, and there's a lot of stress, but I mean, there's a lot of pride too in their equipment, and I know there's always, everyone's looking for land, so everyone's still trying to grow. So I guess it's a hard one for me to really comment on because, the industry I know is having a hard time, but the producers, there's still lots of producers and they're still trying to buy more land. So, they're still going.
You said you've got about 2 acres of vegetables in production.
Yep.
Okay. And about, 3 acres of growing ground and 4 acres altogether that you're renting. Do you guys live there on the farm?
Yeah, we live, if you took an overhead shot or an aerial photo, we basically lived on a long driveway. We're kind of tucked into the woods, and we have a house, and then we built a packing shed or a shop, and then our field is just kind of right in front of our house. It's a triangle, and I kind of joke with my family farm that I did them a favor. All I did was really square off their field so they don't have to farm this annoying little triangle. So, yeah, it's just it's a tiny little spot, but it's my tiny little spot.
All right. And how are you selling your vegetables?
Well, we have a 90-member CSA, and we do a prepaid CSA, so people pay us up front in the spring, and we do a weekly and a biweekly. We don't do a large and a small share. We used to do the 2 sizes, but I found it confusing to try and do the 2 sizes, so I went with a weekly and a biweekly. And we also sell to 2 small independent little stores, and then we also sell wholesale to a company called Plated, and Plated buys vegetables and fruits from small organic or small local farms here in PEI, and then they deal with the restaurants. So they come and pick up the product twice a week at our farms, and I don't know how many farms they deal with, maybe around 9 or 10, and then they deliver to restaurants. And they're really highly sought after by restaurants because they only pick growers who have high quality, and they're really great to work with. And we've been working with them since we lived at our old farm in Brookvale. And I can't say enough about them. They're great folks to work with. That's
interesting to me that they're picking up from 9 different farms and delivering to a bunch of different restaurants, and that's all happening there on Prince Edward Island, which, I mean, it's not a huge island. I just Googled it, and you got about 150,000 people that live on the island there. I mean, is there a pretty active local food scene?
There is a pretty good local food scene, but it's a huge, tourism here is huge. Prince Edward Island, in the summer, gets taken over by tourists. So I think restaurants have a hard time maybe in the off season, but there are so many restaurants, and basically mostly in Charlottetown or maybe like on the North Shore. Plated does deal with some in Summerside, but mostly it would be in the Charlottetown scene. But yeah, tourism in the summer is huge here. Yeah, it's really big.
So you've got the 90 CSA members. Now that's 90 boxes that you're delivering every week, right?
Yes. Yeah, we have about 120 families, and then some of those families choose to get their boxes every week, and some choose to get them every 2 weeks. But we're doing anywhere between 90 and 100 because sometimes in the summer we do have summer clients, but that are only here maybe for 4 to 8 weeks. So I usually just say, like, typically it's about a 90 member CSA.
And can you tell us a little bit about how you got that CSA structured? Folks picking up on the farm, or are you delivering those into town?
Yeah, so what we do is every Tuesday, and our CSA is just a seasonal CSA. So we run from like the end of June till the 1st of November. So we do, every Tuesday we deliver to Charlottetown, and we go to a central pickup, and we do like a market style CSA, I guess you would call it. So we have a tent that I set up, and I have a whiteboard, and I tell everybody, you're entitled to these 9 things. So it's all set up market style. So they pick like, whatever bunch of radishes they want with a bunch of carrots or the bag of greens. And then once everybody gets those things, then they go to what I call the grab box system. And how I run that system is instead of customizing all the boxes or packing boxes, like I used to pack everybody the same share in a Rubbermaid tote. And I decided that based on survey results that I wanted to give people more choice. So they can go to the grab box system, and essentially it's kind of like a free-for-all. So let's say they already got their 9 to 12 items, depending on what we had offered that week. So when they go to the grab box side, it's kind of like 6-foot tables. There's probably 2 to 6 tables, depending on the time of the year. So let's say I'll have my like basil, cilantro, dill, kale, collards, things that not necessarily everybody wants every week, but there's always people. So like I might take, so out of like the 50 or the 45 people that are picking up in Charlottetown on that Tuesday, I might have like 15 bunches of kale, maybe 20 bunches of dill. I might have, maybe there wasn't enough broccoli for everyone, so I'll put the broccoli and the cauliflower. If there wasn't enough, I'll put that in the grab box system. So what I do is I try to give people as much flexibility and choice as I can, and I think that's why, like, we have a really high retention rate on our CSA. We usually have about a 96% retention rate, and I think it's because we give people so much choice, and because we're not going to a farmer's market, I don't feel the pinch, to try and save as much as I can for the market. So our customers are always super happy with the selection. They always go away with the vegetables that they want. And so then we repeat that process again on Thursday. We set up in Summerside, do the same thing with the tent and the grab box system. And then for folks who don't necessarily want to be tied down to either of those pickup times, they can come here to the farm anytime after 4 o'clock on Thursday till Saturday at lunchtime. And there's a cooler, like a Pepsi cooler or a double door cooler. And essentially their boxes are packed with their name on it. But then there's also 3 or 4 Rubbermaid containers and their grab box. So it's the same idea. If they don't like the broccoli in their share, they can leave it behind, but they can also we always have extra things there for them. So it gives the people that live in our neighborhood or maybe that just don't want to be tied down to a pickup time, and gives them the flexibility to come at their own convenience. So I think it kind of works for everybody. It works for us, and we have super happy members, which makes this whole thing worthwhile.
Well, yeah, a 96% retention rate that's kind of outrageous.
Well, I've always been super proud of that because, I'm not a big farm. I don't want to be a big farm. I work really hard to make people happy and to make people comfortable with the system because I don't want to have to look for people every year because that's a lot of work. I have to train members on the pickup time. We have very loyal customers that, and I don't advertise. It's basically just word of mouth. So if for some reason somebody moves away or it just wasn't working for them, we have about a 45-person waiting list at all times. So we're very fortunate with our members. We have amazing people who support us, and that's the reason why I do this, because of them, for sure.
Are members involved in coming out to the farm? Then do people actually come out and work and engage in the operation, or is yours pretty much just moving stuff to town for them?
Well, I guess when I first started, I apprenticed on a farm in Guelph. I was an apprentice on an organic farm there, And we always tried to get people out for like weeding days, but that never was very successful. People always liked the idea of helping, but maybe not necessarily the actions of helping. So when I started my own CSA, I always would have a couple of different events a year. Maybe it was garlic harvest, or maybe it was a weeding party. And I never got a lot of uptake. Our people were always super excited about their vegetables every week, but I found that there wasn't a lot of people wanting to give, in their own time. So now what we started actually last year, we had our first annual farm potluck, and people basically just were able to come. There wasn't any work component to it because I just found I wasn't getting the uptake in that. And we had a great turnout, and people had so much fun, and there was lots of great food. And so I think I'm definitely going to continue that again. And we do have some people that do like to come out. There's always those same people that come every year, and they really, really like that. But I find for the most part, the working part of it just didn't work out for me.
And are you staffing those CSA sites then when you're going to town on Tuesday and Thursday?
Yeah, I do that myself. I'm a bit of a control freak. We could put that into a positive or a negative spin, I guess. I think the main reason that this has been so successful and my members are so happy is because when they have questions, I'm there to talk to, or if they have got a problem, I'm the face they see. And we've developed relationships with these people. Like I've had members with us since I was pregnant with my kids, and they're almost 7. And I've seen their own kids grow up. So I think it's super important that I'm the face of the CSA. I do have people who usually come and help me set up the tent, for instance, and kind of help me set up the produce. And they'll get like whatever vegetables they want in return, just kind of friends that might live close by. But yeah, no, I reserve the CSA pickups for myself because I secretly really enjoy it.
So you guys purchased your first farm in 2006, and you moved to your current location in what year?
Yeah, we moved to this farm here in 2011.
And so did you retain your customers when you made that move? Was that something where you had a group that came with you?
Oh yeah, everybody came with us because essentially, I mean, PEI is very small. It sounds funny when we said we were going to move. We only moved 45 minutes away, which people that live in other places of the world, they think 45 minutes, that's what I drive every day. But and I guess I'll just backtrack a little bit. The reason that when we moved, my husband was working in Summerside, and it was basically, it was a 40-minute drive twice a day. So we just decided that, well, hey, if we could be closer to town, why not? So basically our customers, we still deliver to the same places. Really, most of them probably never even knew we moved. Well, they knew because we told them, but it really it definitely didn't affect them at all.
Okay. And when you guys moved then to Brookvale in 2006 and started your operation, what kind of a marketing mix were you working with then?
Yeah, so back in 2006, when we bought that farm, it was a 200-acre farm, and it was really hilly, and it was beautiful, and it was gorgeous, and fell in love right away. The price was right, and the buildings in the house were really, really old. So we basically bought a fixer-upper. So what we started with there, I was working full-time at the local dairy. I was in quality control, and my husband was working in Summerside. So we were both traveling back and forth. So what we were doing that first year is we were selling kind of like on the weekends to the farmers markets, and we had about a 10 member CSA. So we were both working full-time and just farming, I guess you can say, farming on the off hours. And
then your business just grew to the point where you were able to leave the dairy farming job?
Yeah, it was actually a dairy processing so I worked at a processing facility where they made cheese, but we tested like all the cheese and the milk and all the different products that they made. But yeah, well, when we moved to the farm, that was the intention that within a few years that I would leave that job. So, I mean, my employer knew that it was only a matter of time before I would leave. So it was, we were there. I guess we farmed 2 years while I worked full time. And then in 2008 in the spring, I left there to farm full time. So I was doing the Summerside Farmers Market and the Charlottetown Farmers Market. And we had 10 member CSA. It was super small. But that was kind of like my first year, leaving the steady income to jump into farming full time.
It's a question I get a lot, both in my consulting business and just from people writing and saying, hey, I'm trying to make this decision, or I'm trying to understand when's the right point to make the leap. How did you decide to make the leap from working full time and farming part time to farming full time?
Yeah, I don't know because it wasn't. I know, my plan was always to farm. Was to farm. Ever since I was a kid, I knew I was going to farm at some capacity, and I just had a feeling one day, actually at work. I hadn't even really talked to my husband, and I just said, you know what? I think I'll give them my notice. And it was as simple as that. Like, I mean, we had been farming. I had been growing vegetables since 2003 on a small plot behind my grandparents' house, and I'd been selling steadily. So, I mean, I worked full time and farmed, for quite a few years before I left. Like, I was farming for probably 5 or 6 years before I really left that job. And I mean, it was small scale, but I wanted to make sure that I enjoyed it, because it's one thing to apprentice on a farm and have your boss tell you what to do, and it's the other thing to all of a sudden be responsible for, all these people's vegetables. So I took my time, I worked, and I made sure that the farming is what I wanted to do. So yeah, basically in 2008, I just decided that, I think the time is right. And I mean, luckily my husband he was employed as well. He had a good paying job. So that definitely takes a bit of the risk out of it. I mean, if we were going to try and survive at that time on the income that I was making on the farm, well, we wouldn't have been able to do it. So, but I had a business plan, I had projections and goals, and I knew where I wanted to go. So I really felt comfortable, and I guess there was just something inside me that, and I can't even describe what it was, but it was just like, okay, I feel comfortable making this decision. And I mean, it was definitely hard thing to do. I mean, I had my own office in this dairy, and I loved what I did. I had great coworkers, and I still remember the first day when my husband went to work without me, and I was at the farm by myself. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh, now what? Like,
Yeah,
exactly. I have to make all these decisions, and it was easy before because I always had that, income as backup, and now all of a sudden I have to be responsible for, my part of this family. So it was definitely an eye opener, and it was an interesting summer. But it's funny. It seems so long. It seems so long ago now. I mean, it really wasn't that long ago, but it's like a lifetime ago.
You said you had a business plan, you had projections, and I know a lot of times people will say to me, "Well, why would I do a business plan? Nothing ever goes according to plan. It's farming, it's business." And I'm curious, was that business plan valuable to you as you got started, or did you just feel like that was something that was more of just a security blanket?
Well, we're very fortunate here, I got to say, on the island, because we have tremendous government support for not only for organic, but for small local farmers. So there was a lot of programs back then. One that we were involved with was called the Future Farmer Program. And there was interest rebates as part of that program. And there was also training opportunities where they would pay a percentage of the training. So one of the things was they would pay for a business plan. So luckily enough, like, we were able to hire someone to help us with the business plan. And I look back at it now, and it seems hilarious because I had chickens in there, and we were going to have pigs, and we were going to be completely self-sufficient. And I mean, I basically chopped 90% of that business plan apart. I didn't do most of it, but it was really interesting to see. And I think the greatest part for me now is to look back and think, really? Is that really where I thought I was going to go? Because it's so different kind of in the direction that I ended up going in. But I think it's important because you really have to think about the future, because if it's just thinking about tomorrow, well, that's easy. But, where do you want to be in 5 years' time, and where do you want to be in 10 years? Because before you know it, we're almost 10 years. So it's really, I think it was a very valuable experience, for sure.
So I want to ask a little bit about Derek, because I mean, the name of your guys' farm is Jen and Derek's Organic Farm, which I love, by the way. There's just like, they sort of like just lay it all out there. But Derek works off the farm, right?
He does, yeah. And it's funny because before we ever bought the Brookvale farm, we had our small plot behind my grandparents' house. And I always wanted to come up with this, beautiful artistic name like all my other friends had. And we couldn't. I'm not artsy fartsy. I am not creative. It could not come up with something cool to save my life. So one day Mom said, why don't you call Jen and Derek's farm? And I was like, okay, that works for me. So it's funny because in our, when we were dating and our future plans, it was Derek and I were going to farm together. Like the plan was, it was Jen and Derek's farm. And well, it definitely is Jen and Derek's farm, but I've decided that I don't work well with others. So I kind of have the mentality of I learn a certain way. Like I was trained on an organic farm in Guelph, so I tend to do things of how I was trained. So where Derek is a very open-minded person, likes to try different things, so we definitely clashed when it came to working together. So it didn't take us long to realize that our futures with Jen and Derek's farm, working together wasn't going to happen. So without really, having a big conversation like this is never going to work, I think when we decided to move from Brookvale, because we had a 200-acre farm, we had lots, we could expand there, we had a beautiful woodlot, but we never could enjoy it because Derek was always working. He worked off the farm, and when he was home, I made him work with me. So, he was just worked to death. So we decided that wasn't working well, and that was not going to sustain us in a marriage for very long. So I was the one who was really interested in the vegetables, and that's where we were making our money. So the rest of it, the chickens and, the woodlots, that was just creating more work, and there was no income was coming. So we basically decided to focus on the CSA, or I should say I decided to focus on the CSA. And he, I guess, without really saying he was going to stay working, it kind of made more sense because he had a good job and he enjoyed what he was doing. But he has a very active role on the farm because he takes care of the kids a lot, but he also takes care of the equipment. I am not a mechanic. I'm actually terrible at machinery. I couldn't, fix something to save my life. So he's really good at that. He can see a problem and he can fix it. He can build things for me. He's pretty techy, so it's great. He definitely is. He weeds with our Alice Chalmers tractor. So he definitely has a role, but some people say you should change your name. It's just Jen's farm, which, sometimes, some days I do agree, but it's definitely, it's still Jen and Derek's farm. And what's funny, somebody may come to try and buy a bunch of carrots, and Derek wouldn't even know where the carrots were. He'd have no sweet clue. But, he does have a role. And I think we definitely get along a lot better now. And I think life's a lot simpler now that we've clearly just defined our roles for sure.
You mentioned the kids. Now, you said you stopped working off the farm in 2008. And then you had kids in 2009, right?
Yeah, that was definitely not in the 5-year business plan or the 10-year business plan. I was pretty well convinced that I wasn't having kids. Didn't particularly like kids, so wasn't particularly looking for my own. But, as you know, some things happen. So we found out we were pregnant in 2008, and I found out I was pregnant with twins when I was 20 weeks pregnant. So that was, not only was I in a shock that I was actually pregnant, but it was a big shock to find out I was having twins. So it was that was a big thing personally for me because I was never very a motherly person. I didn't have a lot of patience, never really wanted to have kids. So it was a really hard thing for me personally to deal with because I was so happy. I'm really happy when I'm busy and when I'm outside working. And the thoughts of having to slow down because I had 2 people growing in my stomach wasn't really my idea of a good time. So I had to really struggle with that, which made me feel really guilty because I knew there was a lot of people out there who, would love to have been in my shoes. So once I kind of came to reality that, yes, I'm going to have these 2 babies, that's fine. Then I worked just like I always did. I did everything. I worked up to the day they were born. They were born right on their due date at 40 weeks. I was as big as a house, and I was digging potatoes the day they were born. But it was after they were born that life really took a turn because I had to give the farm over to Derek. He got 9 months maternity leave, and I had to sit in the house. So that was a long, dark summer, but we all survived.
And so if that was in 2009, your boys are in Ben and Jake, right?
Yeah, Ben and Jake. They're going to be 7 in July.
Okay. So that's got to be kind of interesting for you on the farm.
It is, and it's funny because I talk a little bit there about how I wasn't super excited about it at first, and like my grandmother always says, "Oh, you wouldn't give them back, you wouldn't give them back," and I definitely wouldn't give them back. They're two real boys. They are rough and tumble, and they are loud, which is very different from I feel from Derek and myself. We're pretty laid back, quiet people, and they're very theatrical, and they love to get dirty, and they love beating up on each other. But they're not super into the farm. They like to come out and help me for about 30 seconds, and then want to go eat something or go play on their bikes. So they're definitely not those farm kids who are at my side or want to do everything mommy does. And I think it's because I don't really do anything in their eyes that's cool. Like I don't drive big tractors. And, we don't have chickens. So I think they think mommy's job is pretty boring. So they tend to they like to play with their friends, and they like to ride their bikes, and they go to school. They're in grade 1, and they love school, and they're great little guys.
So Jen, I mean, I'm really curious about the whole, how you not as a single mom, but as a single mom on the farm. I mean, you're there alone by yourself now. How you managed that juggling act of having kids and having the farm at the same time?
Yeah, so we were pretty lucky in the fact that Derek, he had 9 months parental leave that he could take from his job. Because I was self-employed, I didn't have any maternity benefits, and I was also had a farm to run. So he was able to take 9 months from his job. So he basically took over the farm, and I became a mom. So it was a struggle for me because I was so used to being outside and kind of calling the shots, and then I had to take a back seat and kind of watch Derek do the CSA and harvest the vegetables, and while I'm inside trying to figure out how to hold two babies at once and trying to make babies happy when I didn't really know what they were doing or what was wrong with them. So I figured about a 5-week-old was kind of like when things started, I feel like the light finally came on about 5 weeks old, when I could kind of maneuver them around, and I wasn't so scared of them, because I literally was scared of them because they're such little people and they cried all the time and I didn't know what to do. So at 5 weeks old, I kind of, I felt comfortable to take them out in public, and I could take them for drives. But I basically, my biggest part, whenever I figured out how to put them on a schedule, and I was big controversy, but the cry it out method, when the babies teach themselves how to sleep. So essentially, we went from being like sleepless parents and sleepless babies to having 2 solid naps a day and sleeping through the night. So I basically would take a baby monitor, and I would, as soon as they went down for their nap, I was outside. And as soon as they slept at night, I was outside. And I basically farmed with a baby monitor. As far as it would let me get away from the house is as far as I would go. So I basically, it was great. I have a couple of pictures from those days, and every picture had me with a baby monitor. And it was kind of like wearing a belt. It was like I just didn't go anywhere without it. And that's how I farmed, with a baby monitor. And luckily, those guys were very consistent in their naps, and they were very consistent in their sleep. So I was able to get a lot done. And I did that for, that was the first year Derek was out working, but the whole next year and the year after is basically how I farmed, because I was home with them and the farm. It was just me, and I basically farmed by baby monitor. I would take them outside when they were awake. Well, we had a lot of black flies, so we couldn't get a lot of work done, but I basically, as soon as they were asleep, I was outside. So, and that's how I farmed those early years, was with that baby monitor, and I got a good one, and it worked well, and I'm super grateful for it.
And then, of course, I mean, at some point they weren't little babies anymore. They were toddlers, and then they were little kids. How did you manage the farm life with 4 and 5-year-olds underfoot?
Right. Well, I felt a lot of guilt, to be honest, back in those days, because I could not get a lot. I got a lot of work done when they were sleeping, but I didn't get a lot of work done when they were awake. And I realized quickly that I wasn't going to be that mom who had her kids home at the farm, because it did not work for me. So I contacted a lady who lived about 15 minutes away, and as soon as they were old enough, and I honestly can't remember how old they were, it might have been 3.5, then I put them into part-time daycare, and I put them in 2 days a week. And that was just enough, because they still napped then. So I was still able to, I had 2 full days plus nap times on the other days. So I was able to get enough done to keep up with the work. And then as soon as we moved to the new farm, they were old enough. So then they went into Summerside to a daycare 3 days a week. And then they went to kindergarten, which is school, which is 5 days a week. I felt like I'd won the lottery when my kids got picked up. And that big yellow bus came and took them away, and for 8 solid hours, 5 days. I'm telling you, I was a pretty happy mama. So I did have a lot of guilt because I would see on Facebook and all these groups, parents with their kids at home, and I felt like I was robbing them of something. But I also know that I was not getting any work done when they were home, and they weren't the type of kids who would just sit there and idly kind of like play, like they always want to be kind of entertained. So I thought, what better way to be entertained is than to have a bunch of kids around. So I feel for our family that was definitely the right decision, was putting them into part-time daycare. And I still feel a little guilty because I think people assume, they say, oh, it must be nice, you work for yourself and you work at your farm. Like, your kids must be so helpful. And I always think, like, well, where do you work? Like, if you work at the bank, like, do you take your kids to work, and how helpful do you think that would be? Like, they're just not helpful. So I sometimes feel like I should be super mom and I should have them home. But then, you know what, that just wasn't the model that was going to work for us. And I don't think it would have worked for them. They go stir crazy on the weekends. They just want to play with their friends, and they want to do things. So I think for us, it was definitely, and still is, it's definitely the right decision, because we have summer coming up. And, when I was a kid in the summer, I didn't go to daycare. Like, we stayed home. Like, I grew up on a farm, but we were very much happy to just, to do whatever. And Ben and Jake I think they just really benefit from a lot of stimulation, and they're super excited to be going to the summer daycare program that they went to last year. And it's a 5-day-a-week program. They go on field trips all the time. They bike. They have so much fun. And I love it because I can focus on my work. And I'm not worried about them, while I'm using the tractor. I'm not worried about them when there's customers coming in. It just, for us, it's definitely, it's how I've managed my sanity, I guess, and my business.
You kind of need your sanity. And I will say, kids are not necessarily conducive to sanity.
No, that's one thing that I said sometimes I feel like God gives us kids to just test our level of sanity. Because, like I said, how can these little people, they're so cute little packages, but they can drive you to the edge. Like, and no one else could talk to someone that way and get away with it. But these little people, they just, I don't know. I love them to pieces, but I sure love when that yellow bus comes and takes them to school.
All right. Well, on that note, I'd like to stop here, get a word from our sponsors, and then we'll be right back with Jen Campbell from Jen and Derek's Organic Farm.
The Farmer to Farmer podcast is made possible with the generous support of Vermont Compost Company, makers of living media for organic growers since 1992. In the transplant greenhouse, all of your investment in plant material, heat, labor, and overhead depends absolutely on the performance of the media where you expect your plants to grow. And that media has a really hard job to do. Produce a healthy plant in just a few cubic centimeters of soil. When I started farming, I focused on getting the cheapest ingredients that I could to make my own potting soil, and later on finding cheap potting soil already put together. But I found that what so many farmers have, that saving money on inputs doesn't always result in increased profits. Jennifer at Vermont Compost can tell story after story of customers who switched to less expensive options, but who have come back to Vermont Compost for the consistency and the quality of their potting soils. And even though it's not all about saving money, Vermont Compost's pre-buy program can help you get what your plants need at the best price, with the best shipping options delivered at a time that works best for you. Plus, their shared truckloads program organizes shipping to other regions in ways that gets shipping prices down to the level you'd pay right there in the great state of Vermont. Feed the soil. VermontCompost.com. This episode of the Farmer to Farmer podcast is sponsored by FarmFan. Most farmers market customers only visit the market 2 or 3 times per season, and there are plenty who make it less often. Market dates simply get forgotten in the wash of soccer games, brunch dates, commuting, and other commitments that keep would-be market customers from becoming regular market shoppers, not to mention the challenges to your customers of knowing when market season begins and ends, or keeping them on schedule for irregular winter markets. FarmFan lets you send a text message reminder to all of your customers, taking the detect fork out of the equation. Plus, you can let customers know what you'll have at market that day and even offer your FarmFan special deals to increase the number of market customers who come specifically to see and buy from you. Unlike emails and social media, text messages are always on. 98% of text messages actually get read compared to 25% of emails and as little as 4% for some social media channels. Who doesn't check their phone when it buzzes? Visit the show notes page for this episode or the sponsor page at farmertofarmerpodcast.com/sponsors for 25% off your 6 or 12-month subscription to FarmFan. Turn your well-meaning occasional shoppers into regulars and create a following. FarmFanApp.com.
All right, and we're back with Jen Campbell from Jen and Derek's Organic Farm on Prince Edward Island, or PEI, as those in the know call it, up in Canada, over on the East Coast. Jen, I thought it would be interesting to talk now, turning away from the family and talking a little bit about how you actually do your 2 acres of vegetable farming. You said that when we were talking before, you said you're not doing this JM40A style. You're not cranking out $150,000 an acre worth of vegetables. What are you producing on your farm?
Yeah, we're definitely not. I don't want to say I'm not productive, because I think that I'm doing, the best job I can, and I think I'm doing a good job at my production, but I'm not super intensively planting. I think, and like my sales are probably in the ballpark between like $80,000 and $90,000, and I'm happy with that. I obviously would love to make more, and if I, was more trying to get more production out of the land. But at the same time, I feel that I might be compromising a bit on my personal life, because the way that I farm is I farm with a cultivating tractor so that I don't have to be out there weeding. So I chose to kind of farm with tractors, so that I wouldn't necessarily be out there with a hoe, so that I would have more time for family. So I guess maybe sometimes you might give up a bit in production, maybe to have a little bit more of a quality of life. So that's the method that I chose. I chose to farm with tractors versus being highly productive. So, and sometimes I wonder, like, did I make the right decision? Because I go to these workshops and I hear, like, the $150,000 an acre, and I think, wow, like, man, that sounds amazing. But I feel comfortable with the production methods that I've kind of gone with, and I'm happy with my sales. Like last year we added in that winter CSA with plated, and we're increasing that big time for this year. And on my sales, I'm hoping to break easily $100,000 this year, and I'm happy with that. I'm not looking to make $1 million. I'm just looking to to provide for my family and to feel like I'm contributing to my fair share.
Tell us a little bit about that winter CSA program with Plate It.
Yeah, so a winter CSA was never something that I wanted to do. I never, the idea of working in the winter, like, ooh, I don't like the thoughts of that. So my friend Soleil, who runs Soleil's farm, she and her partner Lee run Plate It. And she asked if I wanted to work with her on a winter CSA. And I thought, I don't really know if I want to do that. But we talked about it a bit more, and we each chose the crops that we wanted to provide. So she was the face behind it, and I was kind of like I was supplier, but I was also helping her organize it, because she had never ran a CSA before. So I gave her basically like our client list, and I helped her kind of walk through some of the logistics. And yeah, we supplied like carrots and parsnips, some hackeri turnips, onions, shallots, parsley roots, leeks. And every week she would come here and pick up the vegetables. And we did one of the drop-off locations was here, so people could come pick it up. But that was really great, because I've never had income from the farm over the winter. And in my mind, where I thought the winter would be terrible and it would be cold, I realized that it really wasn't. I had everything was in storage. She would give the orders once a week. I knew what I needed to pack, and it was really great. I enjoyed that one. It would take about 1 day a week to pack my share of what was going into the shares. And I realized that there's definitely the winter, I think, is where I would want to expand into, because I feel your summer hours are pretty well tapped. I don't know how much harder I could physically work in the summer or want to work, but the winter, the kids are in school, and I'm basically it's just planning that I'm doing. I definitely have more energy to be doing more of the work, and so I'm pretty excited about the winter program, and I'm pretty excited to keep working with Plated to expand that, because I really feel like that's definitely going to help to grow our business without necessarily having to expand or to find more customers. I'm pretty excited about it.
So tell us a little bit about what you're doing for those root crops, and maybe walk us through that process. So you're now on 2 acres. You're not out mechanically harvesting all of those roots to put them into storage.
No. So last year was the first time I put anything into storage. Our fall CSA, or our main season CSA, always would end the end of October, 1st of November, and then I always did like a bulk harvest for those CSA members who wanted, 50 pounds of carrots. But I never ever stored anything before, so I was really nervous on, how to keep humidity proper, or how to keep the cooler cold, because I have a truck box cooler with a cool bot in it, and I have no fancy gadgets. So I had my 2 employees, and we painstakingly harvested everything by hand. I have a small barrel washer, and I washed all the roots and dried them all, and then put them into like those feed bags. And because I had been to a session on winter storage where the Arnolds had come up to PEI and talked about cold storage, but I literally knew nothing about it. It was just kind of a hope and not a prayer, and it was really an experiment that Soleil and I were doing with this winter CSA. Neither of us really knew how it was going to work. But we put everything into storage, and, I was surprised at how well everything lasted. It lasted right up until the middle of March, and that's when the winter CSA ended, and I was really, really pleased with the sales, and really pleased with the quality of how well everything kept. But it was definitely a learning curve, and storage is definitely something that I'm going to have to expand into, and I'm going to have to buy a bigger cooler, because we definitely don't have room for the capacity of which I'm going to have to store for this winter.
So those feed bags that you were storing crops in, it's a woven, basically a woven polyethylene, right?
Yeah, exactly. I bought them at a local feed or a bag company. Luckily, we have a lot of great local suppliers here, so I was able to buy them from there. And and I had a mister in my cooler that my brother had given me that sometimes they use in their potato warehouse. So I would go in, and I had a hydrometer, I think it's called, but basically test the humidity. I would go in, a couple times a week and test the humidity, and I would turn on my mister, but it was totally amateur. But one thing I realized is that you really don't need like a fancy system and spend a lot of money. So that was a big eye opener. Was like, wow, like the amount of money that I was able to make over the winter, and could easily make triple that by just expanding, doubling the cooler. So I'm excited to see where that's going to go. So, yeah.
And I'm interested in how you were doing the harvest of the crops then. So, again, because for me, we were operating on quite a bit of a larger scale. So when you're doing the crops, are you out there just with a digging fork, and digging up the carrots and pulling off the tops and throwing them in the bags?
Well, no, not really. A couple years ago, because I used to dig carrots with a pitchfork, but my knee started to hurt. So I begged my brother to build me an undercutter bar for my tractor. So basically, whenever I'm digging carrots now, or parsnips, or leeks, or undercutting the onions, I have this undercutter bar, and all it is just you basically put your tractor in 4-wheel drive, and you just drive through the bed, and it just goes underneath the carrots and just shatters the soil. That way. So I'll drive through the bed, do that, and then the carrots you just pull them out without digging with a fork or anything. But yeah, we were hand snapping the tops, and then I would put them. They would get loaded into the truck in the Rubbermaid containers. I'd take them back to the shop. I put them through my barrel washer, and then I would put them in those black bulb crates to kind of like to drip dry overnight, and then I would put them in those bags. and sealed the bags, and then I put the bags into the cooler. So like I said, everyone says, oh, some people say, oh, you shouldn't wash your carrots, and the next person said, oh yeah, you should always wash your carrots. So I left some unwashed and some washed, and they both stored extremely well. So I was pretty pleased.
I always like leaving. I'm just going to weigh in on the washed versus unwashed debate, because I know it's a huge source of contention, and I know people that succeed both ways. I always like leaving them unwashed because then you can wash them in the wintertime. But I suppose that really is dependent on having the facilities to do that.
And that was a big thing, because I did build a shop 2 years ago, but I don't have any heat in it. So my barrel washer, essentially, my big concern with having them unwashed was, well, then I have to wash them in the winter, and my shop's not heated. So it was the whole, like, is my water going to freeze? So basically, that's why I basically washed them, because I knew, well, at least if they're washed, then they're washed. Because our clay here, like our dirt here, is so red that the carrots get stained really bad. So that was another reason why I wanted to wash them. But yeah, it's controversy over that. It depends who you talk to. But now Soleil stored some carrots unwashed, and she's still putting them in her spring CSA. And I mean, here we are, into June, and they're still really good. So I definitely see I think next year I'm going to do half of them washed and half of them unwashed, because I am going to put heat in my shop this winter.
So tell us a little bit about your packing facility, because you said that you do food safety consulting for the potato farmers around you. I'm curious how you ended up implementing a packing shed then on your farm, on your scale.
Right. So our shop's pretty small. It's a 30 by 30 building, and I built an overhang, like a lean-to off the side. And so the shop itself is where we bag all of our greens. So we wash everything outside, but it's under it's open, I guess, on all three sides, but it's got a concrete floor, and that's where my barrel washer is, and that's where our wash tubs are. So everything gets washed outside, and then gets put into the cooler. But then the bagging is done inside. Now we're not certified with anyone for on-farm food safety here in PEI or anything. But I do take a lot of what I consult or what I recommend to my growers. I try to implement a lot of that here. So, we have employee training sheets on the importance of hygiene, and I have training sheets on the importance of proper handling of the vegetables. And I have shadow-proof light bulbs. Different things like that. So it's a great building. Before I had the shop, I literally washed vegetables under a tent, like a tent you'd get at like Walmart, and I packed everything in my little single car garage. So the year that I decided to build the shop, I mean, it was a huge expense, but it was kind of like I got to the point where I'm either going to make the business smaller so that it fits with the scale, or I'm going to build a shop and make it a bit bigger. As soon as the shop was built, like, I can't believe that I used to farm in the small spaces, or I used to process in the small spaces that I did, because having the shop is it's a luxury now. Like, I look back and I think, oh my goodness, I used to work in my garage. Like, that's crazy. And now I have this big, beautiful building that, I'm super, super proud of and super happy to have.
Now, you just mentioned employees, and you were talking a little bit about tractors before. So I kind of want to round out the picture of how your farm actually works. So you've got the cultivating tractor. Do you have another tractor as well?
Yes. So I kind of probably have a little more machinery around than I actually need, but I love tractors, and I love things that make my job easier. So I have a front end loader tractor. I have a 4-wheel drive Ford, and that I use I put the discs on or put the harrows. I use that my raised bed maker, and then we have a second tractor. It's a little small international tractor, and I haven't even used it this year, but when we first had our other farm, we had a different tractor, and we sold it and we bought the red tractor, the international. But then my dad upgraded his front end loader to a new big, beautiful tractor, and so I bought his old tractor. So in a way, we have one tractor too many, but we had it and it was paid for, so and it works really great. So we use that when we're spreading compost, or if we're going to use the tiller, we leave the tiller on the international tractor, so we're not changing implements all the time. And then the Alice Chalmers, the ACG, it's a cultivating tractor, and I couldn't imagine farming without it, because that basically we cultivate everything with the G, and it's electric, so it's nice because it's super quiet. And we definitely, for our scale, we have what I call a lot of iron kicking around, because I don't want to be out there with a hoe if I don't have to, because I don't figure anyone's paying me to weed, right? They're paying me to harvest and to plant. So I try to eliminate the amount of time that we're out there weeding or hoeing. So yeah.
Did you guys do the electric conversion on the G yourselves?
We did. We bought the G from this lovely man that we bought the tractor from in Ontario. And unfortunately, his wife had passed away, and he was going to convert the tractor himself, but he never got around to it. So when we got the G, it had the conversion kit already. It had never been put together, so we're lucky we didn't have to source the parts or anything. So Derek did that himself, and it was really, really easy. He set it all up in the garage first and made sure it worked, and he literally took him a half an hour probably to put it all together. So we're pretty proud of the G. It's I remember there's a firm that I follow, a blog, Oak Hill Organics, and I think it's Casey and Katie. Anyways, I remember one time they talked about investing in equipment that is going to save you time. And one of the first things they bought, I remember, was this Alice Chalmers tractor. And I thought, I'm never going to, how am I ever going to afford to buy one of these tractors? Anyway, so that's been one of the mentalities that I've taken kind of from the beginning is, okay, if I'm going to spend money on something, it's going to have to make my life better and easier. And especially when Ben and Jay came along, and I realized, there's not endless hours in the day anymore. These little people need to eat, and it takes a long time to put them to bed. So, spare time or time to work is harder to come by. So buying the Alice Chalmers was the best thing that for sure we ever did. It's been an invaluable tool for sure.
And then how many employees do you have working with you on the farm?
So we never used to have any employees. And then one year, I can't even remember what year, I had a volunteer who would come out and help me maybe 2 afternoons a week. And I realized, wow, you can get a lot more done when you have an extra person. So the year the boys were born, we hired somebody to help Derek that summer. And I've had an employee ever since. So last year was the first year where I had 2 employees. I had my main girl was Sarah, and this will be her 3rd year coming back. And she works 4 days a week, maybe 6 to 7 hours a day. And then Marty, this will be her 2nd year coming back. She worked 2 days a week, about 6 or 7 hours a day. So they're not full-time hours. And Sarah, they only work, to the CSA season. So they're here from June until the end of October. So they're not full-time, but it's definitely, and I feel like I don't really need somebody around in the spring. It's mostly once the harvesting happens. That's when I find I really need, because we do everything by hand, that's when I really need the extra help. So, and I'm lucky that, this is Sarah's 3rd year coming back, and this is Marty's 2nd year. So I feel like I'm pretty lucky, to have them return, because it's a lot of work to train somebody every year. So I'm super grateful that they've decided to return.
So Jen, I'm imagining that it's a pretty cool climate there on Prince Edward Island. Can you tell us a little bit about what you run into climate-wise and how that affects the things that you're choosing to grow?
Sure. Yeah, we're pretty chilly here in the spring and in the fall, although our falls are tending, for some reason, they're getting warmer longer. But in the spring, I use my greenhouse to grow early season greens, and then I grow cold season greens outside, like my kales under cover and my arugulas. But in the summer, once July hits, it does get pretty warm. We're averaging, I'd say, between mid-20s. It can get to the low 30s, but that's unusual. But it's really humid here. It's really high humidity, and it can feel really muggy, which is our big thing. So we can have a lot of disease pressure here. Blight is definitely a big problem here on PEI, and it's a huge problem for the potato growers. So I'm really particular on say my tomatoes. I only grow blight resistant varieties outside, and I try to grow like short season varieties. So I used to grow like, heirlooms and all different kinds, but I just found the blight pressure, and I don't want to be that neighbor who, had blight in their tomatoes. So I've gone to the blight resistant varieties, the Defiance and the Mountain Magic. So I'm really pleased with those two varieties. I found that they've produced really consistently, and my customers seem to like them. And in my greenhouse, I am growing grafted tomato varieties that are more like a cherry varieties that are grafted. So I am growing more of a collection for my customers as well. But I know that I've been the only one around for miles who's had any tomatoes the last, since I started growing the blight resistant. So we've sold a lot of plants to our neighbors and to plant sales the last few years because people are realizing that, maybe the blight resistant aren't maybe not the most beautiful or, the more unique, but it's great in a blight year. And we often do get blight here at the end of the season. So it is great to have tomatoes, in October when everyone else's are totally dead.
Well, with that, Jen, I'd like to turn to our lightning round at the end of the show here. So what's your favorite tool on the farm?
Ooh, that's a good one. I have so many favorite tools. I think I'd have to say that the undercutter bar that my brother made for me, that has saved my knees. So that essentially, I think, has kept me farming. Without that, I'm not physically sure that I would have done it anymore. So the undercutter bar is amazing. I can't imagine that people still dig carrots with a fork because that thing is awesome. I love our Alice Chalmers cultivating tractor because Derek, he does most of the weeding. He can go out and weed in an hour what would take me and employees like a day. So I love that. We have the basket weeder on our G, and I love the basket weeder. And one thing for a hand tool, it's like a stirrup hoe, but it's actually not from Johnny's. I do have Johnny's stirrup hoes, but because in Canada, the shipping is kind of expensive, but it's also expensive to bring it in across the border. So I found another company called Garant, and they make it just looks like the Johnny's version, but it's a Canadian company, and it's called like the Grizzly Action Hoe Pro Series, and it's amazing. So it's just nice for us Canadians who get something a little more local. So I think those would probably be. Oh, I have to mention another one. Row covers are my least favorite thing, but we built this. It's not even a device. It's just two sawhorses, and you use PVC pipe, and it's the PVC at the end just has an attachment, so you can roll up your row cover. So instead of like bundling it all in from the field, when I've done a bed, I can roll up the bed, and then I mark on the ends with a Sharpie, how long the row cover was, what shape it was in. So that's really changed. Instead of row cover being a big mess and you didn't know how long it was. So I think those are some of the things just off the top of my head that I would think would be my favorites.
What's your favorite crop to grow?
Yes. It's funny, I get asked that all the time. And I find it hard to pick, but I think if I had to pick, I like growing colored carrots. The restaurants buy a lot of multicolored carrots for us from like a baby size. But I really like, I love when they just come out of the barrel washer and they're all the multicolored and they're all together and they're all beautiful. And I think they're gorgeous. And when I can have a really weed-free section of carrots, I think they look beautiful. But I like growing lettuce. Like I like the Salanova mix. Like I used to always direct seed my lettuce mix. And then a couple of my friends here in the island, they started like transplanting their mix and cut and come again. And I had never done that before. And so last year was my first year growing like the Salanovas. And I also grew, I guess, I'm not sure what they call them, but the Osborne's multi-leaf, I think some of them are. And yeah, that really changed our lettuce production. I found the quality went up a lot. And yeah, so I used to really not like harvesting lettuce, and I really didn't like washing it because when I direct seeded it, I always had, you'd always get those kind of the poor leaves at the bottom. So now I find lettuce that's really sped up the process. So I'm loving the Salanovas. I don't like the price, but I love the production.
What was the last purely recreational activity you did?
Wow, purely recreational. I guess I took the boys for a bike ride. Does that count?
That counts. It's great.
Yeah, we're lucky here on the island because we used to have trains, but they took all the trains out, years ago. But all the railroad tracks were ripped up and they made them into, they call it rails for trails, and it's all like light gravel. And so you can bike the whole one tip of the island to the other. So it's great. You can park anywhere basically and find a trail and you can bike forever. So it's pretty awesome.
And if you could go back in time and tell your beginning farmer self one thing, what would it be?
I think if I could tell myself anything, I think I would tell myself to do a second apprenticeship, because I did a 9-month apprenticeship on an amazing farm. I was super lucky. I had a great farmer who essentially inspired me to do what I do, because when I grew up, my farm was run by men, and the women either took care of the kids or they did the books or they worked off the farm. So this was the first farm I ever worked on that was run by a woman. And I think if I had taken a second apprenticeship after that one, I think I would have had more confidence going into starting my own farm. I think only one apprenticeship, I think, just doesn't quite give you, in my opinion, it didn't give me enough confidence I think that's why it took me so long before I started my own farm. But I think another thing is confidence. Like I still feel now, like I still feel like I'm a bit of a fraud, or like I don't have a lot of confidence in what I do. Like, I don't know if it's because I'm a small producer and, amidst giant producers. So I think even now I need to tell myself, like, have more confidence in what you do. But back then, just to be proud, you don't have to, I'm just a small farmer. You don't have to apologize for what you do. But the one thing that I wish I had done, and I never did until this past year, is I wish I had to set myself up with like accounting software. I always just did my books on spreadsheets. And then I finally got trained in the QuickBooks accounting. And then this past year, I switched over to the Farm Credit Canada program analyst. And that's really changed, I feel, how I look at my business, because within a click of a button, I can see who owes me money, who I owe money. I can see, where I'm spending my money, where I'm losing money. And it's really changed how I view my business. So if that's one thing I could have done years ago, that's what I would have done, is got myself set up with proper accounting software.
All right. Jen, thank you so much for taking the time this morning to talk to us on the Farmer to Farmer podcast. I really appreciate all your insights and the fact that you're so willing to share your experience with us.
Well, I'm so pleased to be asked. It's quite an honor, and I'm so happy that you asked me.
All right, so wrapping things up here, I'll say again that this is episode 72 of the Farmer to Farmer podcast, and that you can find the notes for this show at farmertofarmerpodcast.com by looking on the episode page or just searching for Campbell. That's Campbell. When I say you can find the notes by looking on the episodes page and all of that I say at the end of every episode, what I really mean by the notes is we've got a description of the episode and we've got some quotes we pulled out from the show. But then I think the really cool thing that we do is we've got links from the show. So, when Jen talks about the tools that she's getting up in Canada, or when she talks about the leaf lettuce that she really likes from Osborne Seed Company, we go ahead and try to track that stuff down and make sure that there's that link is there for you so that you don't have to remember everything from while you're out there driving the tractor and listening to the Farmer Farm podcast. Because, it's hard sometimes to stop and write stuff down and all that. So this is a place where you can go, oh yeah, I just need to remember to go check out those show notes, farmertofarmerpodcast.com, look up somebody's last name, or just scroll through the episodes pages, which are set up kind of like a blog. So check that out. I also want to say one of my favorite things about managing presentations at the Moses Organic Farming Conference, which I did for 13 some odd years, starting in about 2000, is I really like keeping my ears to the ground for the real stories of farming, not just the flashy success stories that make great books, although, wow, those are cool and inspiring and tremendously valuable. And I know that I've gotten so much from working for some of the big names in agriculture, but I also really like digging out the stories of the farmers who are just out there doing it, making things work day after day, figuring stuff out, figuring out how to manage whatever life throws at them, because that's what most of us are doing. And I wanted everybody to be part of the story. We've all got so much to learn from each other. And that's why it's such an honor to be in the position of finding people like Jen or Nate or Janet or Matt or Laura. And I could go on and on. And I've heard again and again from listeners how much they appreciate the inspiration and the information that the Farmer to Farmer podcast provides. And I want to keep it coming, and I want to keep making it better. Please keep your ears on this space for some ways that you can become a bigger part of the Purple Pitchfork family and support the Farmer to Farmer podcast. In the meantime, if you enjoy the show, I'll bet you'd like to be on my email list, the Flying Rutabaga. You can check that out at farmertofarmerpodcast.com or purplepitchfork.com. Also, please head on over to iTunes, leave us a review, talk to us in the show notes, or tell your friends on Facebook about the Farmer to Farmer podcast. Your reviews and your referrals are the bread and butter of our ability to reach out to sponsors to help make this show work. Finally, thank you so much to everybody who has taken the time to submit a guest suggestion. Many of these episodes come directly from your recommendations on the suggestions form on farmertofarmerpodcast.com. Thank you so much for listening. Be safe out there and keep the tractor running.